Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is from 1978, and it's The Big Fix, directed by Jeremy Paul Kagan from 1978, starring Richard Dreyfuss, F. Murray Abraham, Bonnie Bedelia, John Lithgow, uncredited appearances by Diane Abbott and Mandy Patinkin. And this to me is a perfect example of what Indicator do best. If you're familiar with my channel at all, if I say this is a quintessential Indicator release, you might know what that means. This is a film that you could see would have absolutely no box office appeal at the time and has been forgotten about, and Indicator have lovingly restored it and treated it beautifully, as they do. Again, with Indicator's limited editions, you get a wonderful booklet, and it has some really good extras. This release has a commentary. It has a 23-minute interview with Jeremy Paul Kagan, who describes his early career, and he also uses a Muppet in the intro and outro. Not quite sure what that's about. And then the screenwriter, Roger L. Simon, there's an interview with him as well. It was based on his book, so it's the same writer who did the script and book, which is always good. There's an archival TV interview with Richard Dreyfuss, and an archive interview with the writer-director. There's TV spots. But this is an absolute, it's another Indicator gem. Richard Dreyfuss stars as a private investigator. We're introduced to him as he is checking out a turkey factory. He has his two sons with him and they're counting turkeys. We realise that he does have a gun, but there's no, the part for where the bullets go has been taken out, and there's a crayon in the barrel. He has a broken wrist, which Dreyfuss actually broke before the start of filming, so they just worked it into the film. And it's wonderful because as he meets all these characters during the film, he comes up with a different explanation of how he broke his arm, or how he broke his wrist, depending on who he's speaking to. He kind of alters the story, which is a lovely little touch. There's wonderful little character touches like that, like the condition of his gun, the fact that when he goes home he plays Cluedo and he tries to work out, who done it. He's also a private detective. He's an unusual private detective in film and literature in the sense that he's not a loner. He doesn't have a drinking problem. He's divorced from Bonnie Bedelia. He looks after his two children, who sometimes he takes on jobs with him. It actually reminds me a lot of the scene in, I think, season 3 of The Wire, where McNulty uses his two children to trail, I think it's Stringer Bell, through like a market. So Dreyfuss does a lot of kind of taking his kids along. He also has an aunt that he kind of drops off the kids with and kind of gets her involved as well. So it's a different kind of private detective. Dreyfuss is wonderful in this film. Sometimes he can come across as being a little bit smug in roles, but he's really good in this. It is an amazing cast. You'll recognise all these faces that will pop up even just in small roles. It's essentially about a private detective who's down on his luck, as most private detectives are, and an old flame who's working for somebody's running for governor comes to hire him because there's leaflets which show this left-wing revolutionary played by F. Murray Abraham kind of been photoshopped with the candidate, and of course they want to distance themselves from that, so they hire Dreyfuss to find out where these flyers came from, and to try and find F. Murray Abraham's character. So on the surface, there's this kind of light knockabout comedy. I kind of call it. It's like an Alan Pakula Paranoia light version, but then it does have tonal shifts throughout the film. So it starts off as this kind of light comedy, but it does get darker as the film progresses. It's a classic example of why American cinema is so good in the 70s. You can have this small little film which on the surface seems like one thing, but there's actually a lot more going on underneath. There's references to the California Four, which F. Murray Abraham was involved with. These were revolutionaries who did bombings and bank robberies, and then when they were arrested, John Lithgow's character, in one of Lithgow's earliest performances, who works for the campaign office as well. Everybody's kind of tied back to 68 at University of Cal Berkeley, but it's also a film about how people who are activists and revolutionaries at some point they settle down and become bankers and lawyers, because obviously when you look at Woodstock and all those kids at Woodstock, I'm sure most of them ended up being bankers and lawyers and working for the man, especially in the mid-60s in America and California, the revolutionaries and the Marxists. But there's somebody that Dreyfuss contacts in the DA's office to help him, and of course he was part of that 10 years earlier, but now he doesn't want that part of his life to come out because he'll probably lose his job. So it's this kind of, yes, you believed in certain things, but then with assassinations in Vietnam and people became disillusioned, the summer of love didn't last very long, and these revolutionaries and Marxists, and they have to settle down at some point, and they end up selling out and becoming the institutions, becoming the establishment. So there's lots of wonderful things that talk about that during the film. It has a nice labyrinthine plot, like the best private investigator films do. It has a great score, again, but there's lovely little character beats. Bonnie Bedelia, his ex-wife, she is going out with Ron Rifkin, who you'll probably recognise, he was in LA Confidential. He's a kind of new age kind of philosophy thing about giving yourself over and pretending to be a tree. So there's lots of kind of satire about that, because that was kind of gaining traction at that time as well. There's just so much going on. It flies by. It's 108 minutes. It's just a wonderful film. Again, it's perhaps not to everybody's taste, but it's another just absolute classic indicator release, and all that phrase means. Again, it's about class. It's about how money rules everything, and how the people with money view people who don't have money. It's an absolute blast, and again, you don't really know anything ahead of Richard Dreyfuss's character, which again is always good. So you're not sitting there as an audience going, I know more than the protagonist does. So it does have a wonderful score, and also the locations in East LA with murals are really, they foreshadow Michael Mann's use of locations in LA. There's a lot of stuff that you go, that's just like from Heat, which would be like 17 years later. So there's wonderful locations in LA, especially East LA. Again, there's, one of the candidates, or one of the characters is Chicano, so it's like it's that culture as well, mixed with the white collar. There's lots of political stuff going on, but it's never rammed down your throat. But again, it just has this underlying idea of what happens to revolutionaries and people in the counterculture when that all dies off. When we find out what actually happened to F. Murray Abraham's character, it's just absolutely wonderful. It still has points that are relevant today as far as politicking, as far as campaign management. It's just a wonderful film that, again, I was not aware of, and you can see how in 1978 it would have just fallen out of the box office very quickly, because there's no real market. Again, the tonal shifts might be a little off-putting, because again, it does kind of start off as this light comedy, there's kids involved, but again, it does get a bit darker. There's scenes with lots of tension in it. There's scenes that perhaps prefigure Speed a little bit. There's a lot going on. It's an absolute gem, and it's another example of what Indicator do best. Again, you might blind buy it and go, yeah, am I going to like this, am I going to not? But sometimes you just have to trust Indicator, who more often than not do kind of know what they're doing. It's not as mind-blowing as something like The New Centurions was to me, which just completely blew me away, but it's close to it, because it's an absolute gem. So I would highly recommend you pick it up, and you can let me know what you think of it, because there's a lot going on in it, and it is wonderful seeing these actors like Bonnie Bedelia and John Lithgow kind of at the start of their career. It's just a wonderful film, and another Indicator home run as far as I'm concerned. So thanks so much for watching this random review about The Big Fix with Richard Dreyfuss as Moses Wine, his character name, honest. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. You can let me know in your comments if you've seen The Big Fix and what you think of it. And hopefully you'll join me again. This is Solid Your Own from Solid Your Own Films, saying cheerio.